Hey everyone, I hope you're all doing well. Welcome back to my channel. This is Ian with Out of This World Reader, and it is that time where I just blab about all the books I got to in January. And January wasn't that bad of a reading month for me. I really got through quite a few books, thankfully, and then school didn't pick up until that last couple weeks leading up to February, and it really came out of nowhere and kind of just smacked me up a little bit. So I didn't get too much books read closer to the end of the month, but in the beginning I was just going through so many. So many, I'm just going to jump right into the first one. The first one that I got to this month was The Final Empire by Brandon Sanderson, which received 4.5 stars. And I'm just going to mention that I'm going to put all the books up here because I use my hands a lot and I don't want to be kind of like flinging my book around all the time, so I'm just going to set it up here. The reason that I got to this book was that this is supposedly kind of the starting point for getting into adult fantasy, and especially Brandon Sanderson. And with him having so many other books that are kind of well known and well praised, I really wanted to kind of just start with this and then see how I felt about adult fantasy and kind of break myself into that a little bit. And this is no joke. This is a legit book, and I loved every second that I spent with it. And it's a big book. Like, the whole series in general I think is almost like 700 pages. So it's a lot to get through. If you have no idea what this is about, this is following Vin, who is a Mistborn, and she's able to control all the different abilities of the metals. That being said, in this fantasy world, evil has essentially won, and this group of kind of ragtag underdogs, they're just going right at this evil. They've come up with this plan, and they're just following through with it to kind of take down the darkness, or not so much the darkness, but the evil that's kind of ruled over the land. I loved this from the start, just the different aspects with the elements. That's something that you just never really read about, especially me. I've never read much about adult fantasy, so I'm kind of like a rookie to all of this. But just the way that each metal kind of worked with each other, and it was just like so mesmerizing to kind of just visualize these fight scenes that were occurring, and they would like just, it's so complex to kind of just even to explain. But I think once you kind of get that first initial kind of understanding of it, it makes it really enjoyable. I think what I enjoyed the most was the keeps that are spread out throughout the city, and they're all unique in their own way. Like, one of them had it was like a pyramid shape, and it was like each level kind of like expanded, and it was so visually pleasing. And then they have the balls within, which gave me kind of like Victorian-esque, like England and France. And another thing that I enjoyed was just the cast of characters and how each of them are so unique. They all are in some ways able to control the metal, some form of metal. And they're all funny. The interactions that they have kind of like in the den and just talking with each other, each one of them is just so unique in their own way. It almost reminded me kind of like Six of Crows a little bit, which I got to this month as well. I kind of got similar vibes in that each characters come together, or that each character is unique in their own way, and that they all fit like a puzzle into this piece. The reason that I given this 4.5 stars is because there was a point at in the middle of the book where it was kind of just like dragging on, it felt like, and it was just kind of learning more on the background, and that kind of just wasn't all there for me. But then just out of nowhere it kind of just picked back up, and I'm interested to see where it kind of continues on with the Well of Ascensions, which I hope to get to in the month of February, so we'll see where that goes. But overall, it's a really, really good intro to the adult fantasy and just Sanderson in general, so I would recommend it to anyone that's looking for any of that. The next one that I got to was The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins, and this I gave 3.5 stars. This one was definitely tough for me. It wasn't that I didn't like the book, it was just that I had kind of seen all the movies, so I knew what was going to happen right from the start, and that kind of made it boring a little bit because I knew like everything that was going to happen. But this was something that I really wish when I was younger, like those kind of like YA tropes were definitely more prevalent, and since I'm now considered like an adult or something like that, it was a bit harder for my enjoyment. But I feel like if I was younger and read it before I watched the movies, it would have been so much better. This is another pretty popular series, and I'm not going to go into much detail kind of about the background, but it is following Katniss, who is fighting in these Hunger Games where kids from each district could just basically come together and just like kill each other. And it's definitely the plot and the premise is what I enjoyed about it, and I'm definitely looking forward to kind of continuing on with the series just to kind of get it done, because sadly I've never read them before, and that's kind of like embarrassing a little bit to me anyway. So I'm definitely going to continue on with it. This next one was really something special to me, and that was Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo, which is the first book in the Six of Crows duology. I'm going to give you my thoughts kind of more in depth when I do kind of like a series wrap up when I finish Crooked Kingdom. But overall, this was really something special, and I picked it up at like kind of the perfect time. Especially like picking it up right after the Hunger Games. I felt like I was kind of bummed out on the Hunger Games. I was really hoping to enjoy that a lot more. And this kind of just like came up and just like picked me up and really got me out of like a somewhat of a reading slump. Just everything about this is just so mind-blowing. Just the Grishaverse in general, I love it so much. It kind of has motivated me to pick up the Shadow and Bone trilogy before the kind of Netflix adaptation comes out, because that's another one that's really well hyped up, and I'm hoping that that's just as good as this one. This is another popular series, and if you don't know much about it, it's following this group of kind of misfits and really underdogs similar to the Final Empire, and they go on this heist. But similar to the Final Empire, I just loved every single character, especially like Nina and Matthias, how they kind of like interacted throughout the city, and as the story kind of progressed on, you just learn more about their backstory. And that was the same for like all the characters. There were several like flashbacks to their past and kind of explaining how they got to where they were today. And it was just like that they all had something kind of like holding them back. Not so much holding them back, but they were just struggling with something. And just the ending was just, it was crazy, like it's legit. And I already kind of picked up Crooked Kingdom, and it's really picking up as well. Now this one was the first disappointment of 2021, and that was Outlawed by Anna North, which I gave 2.5 stars. When I read the premise of this, I was expecting kind of like the female version of the Magnificent Seven, and it was just like, I imagined like these badass women kind of just going around kicking ass, robbing banks and stuff like that, like some Red Dead Redemption stuff. But it just wasn't, like, it wasn't there for me. Like, this is following Ada, who has troubles giving birth to a child, and because of this she flees home because they're basically hunting her down because they think she's a witch. And she escapes to find this group that's run by the kid, the famous kid. And it just goes from there as to their plans to kind of make a community for all those women and just people in general that are kind of hiding, or not so much hiding, but just like fleeing and escaping from just not so good things. The story is very character driven. You follow Ada throughout just kind of like her journey, and then it'll explain a little bit about a past. What really caused me to kind of not like this was because at like some of the action scenes, like you would be kind of like right in the mix of it, kind of it would start picking up, and then just all of a sudden it would end, and then it would just kind of like wouldn't even explain like what happened, and I was very disappointed by that. I was wanting more kind of like of that interaction. But this definitely touches on very important aspects. Just the way that women were treated back then was just kind of disgusting, and unbearable to kind of read about, which makes it important for us to read, because just to gain a better understanding of the things that they had to go through. Overall, I don't really want to turn you away from this because it could be for you. It just wasn't there for me, unfortunately. Jumping into the next one that I got to, which was Gods of Jade's Shadow by Silvia Moreno-Garcia, which received 4 stars. This is following Cassiopeia, who lives with her grandfather and cousin and some other family, and with her mother. And the way that they treat the grandfather and the cousin, they just really treat Cassiopeia and her mother really terribly. But one day she kind of like opens up this chest and releases the Mayan god of death. And from there the kind of story unfolds. Basically the Mayan god kind of binds Cassiopeia to himself, and they have to go on this journey throughout the South America to kind of take back his throne. But what makes it interesting is the brother of the Mayan god kind of hires on Cassiopeia's cousin to kind of track her down and stop them, her and the Mayan god, from him regaining his throne. What really did it for me in the story was kind of their journey throughout South America during the Jazz Age, which is another time period that I love to read about, and kind of their interactions with the other kind of minor gods and their conflicts, and the Mayan god that's traveling with Cassiopeia kind of regaining the trust of these other minor gods. It's just so, the flow of writing is really descriptive and paints these vivid pictures, and then just the leading up to it just kept building on to it, I felt like, and it was hard to put down. And if you know me, I love mythology in general, and I've never read about Mayan mythology, so it was something different. I'm used to like Greek and Roman mythology, so kind of taking a break from that and reading this was something that I've never really done before, and I'm glad I did. And there's kind of like a little bit of romance between the Mayan god and Cassiopeia, and it's funny, just their kind of interactions between each other. Cassiopeia as a main character kind of reminds me of my little sister a little bit, kind of strong and defiant, and she gets what she wants and she goes after it. And it was just funny to kind of like hear those interactions between them and her grandfather and her cousin. But overall, I can't even remember why I gave this 4 stars, to be honest. Me kind of like going over it kind of just makes me wonder why I did. But overall, I would recommend to anybody just looking forward to getting into mythology, reading something different. And I've heard some rumors that Silvia Moreno-Garcia is having another book coming out later on in the year, set in Mexico City, with some like vampires and gangs. So I'm kind of looking forward to that as well. I then got to another great book, and that was Lore by Alexandra Bracken, which I gave 5 stars as well. And this is a book that I plan on going more in depth with on kind of like a book chat somewhat kind of mini series that I want to start. But this is essentially following Lore, who is involved in the Aegon, which happens for 7 days every 7 years, where the gods are kind of thrown back down onto the earth throughout different locations around the world. And this one actually takes place in New York, but they're thrown back down to the earth. All their powers are stripped, and then other bloodlines of famous Greek heroes like Perseus and Hercules, they essentially kind of hunt them down, and if they kill them, then they're able to kind of like take their powers. This flew under the radar for me. Like, I had no idea about it until even a week before it came out, when I saw it on someone's most anticipated releases. And once I understood kind of like the premise of it, I was like, yep, I am getting that right away. And as soon as it came in, like, I had picked it up and I was so excited for it, and it really was something really good. And it was really something, let me tell you. I loved every second with it, and I'll go more in depth with it. But just the characters, I feel like I've said characters so much, but just these characters in general were so like interesting. I've said that a lot too. I'm bad at this, I'm sorry. But just long story short, I definitely recommend you check this out, especially if you love Greek mythology. It's definitely a different spin on like the originals, like originally what I'm used to with kind of the Percy Jackson and how it's all lighthearted and these gods really can't die. So it was definitely a different twist, and I would just recommend it to anybody looking for more Greek mythology. Picking up a thriller kind of like on the whim, I got to Leave the World Behind by Rumaan Alam. I'm sorry if I'm really butchering that. This is following a family that takes a vacation to kind of the secluded part of the East Coast, and then the supposedly owners of the whole house, a rental vacation house, show up and they claim that basically the world is ending, and it just goes from there. And the families are kind of faced with trust issues. These two families that are thrown together are faced with just a lot of trust issues, and they're definitely questioning each other a lot. And it was what really didn't do it for me was that it switches between perspectives a lot. Like, you don't know it. Like, you could be reading from one perspective of one character, and then just all of a sudden it would be in the mind of a different character. But I thought that was interesting how you kind of, each character kind of portrayed their own thoughts on each other and the events that were occurring. And it was interesting because I've always liked like an apocalyptic theme, and just as these events kind of like unfolded, I was starting to kind of piece together things, and I was kind of like questioning. Like, I was definitely keeping up, like I was kept up at night just like thinking about like random stuff that could have happened. This is a pretty short thriller, so if you're looking for something kind of just to give you a little bit of an apocalyptic spooky kind of theme to kind of maybe keep you up at night, then I would definitely pick this up. But I think I overall gave this like 3 stars. And that was because of just like this randomly switching perspectives. Like, it was really throwing me off at times, and it wasn't as exciting as I was hoping it to be. I was expecting kind of there to be more conflict between the different families and just with the outside world, but it was really localized to that kind of vacation home, and you really don't get any more interaction with the outside world until later on in the end. But I won't go into anything in depth with that. I feel like I've said I've gotten to so many good books this month, but this is another no joke book that I really loved, and that was The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern. Similar to those other ones, this is another popular book, and I'm really glad that I got to it. I ended up giving it 4.5 stars, but if you don't know what it's about, it's essentially following Zachary, who kind of comes across this book that has a chapter about him from his childhood, and there's no author and there's no kind of publication date, and it kind of just explains other things that are kind of going on. I'm going to go more in depth in that kind of like little books chat something. I don't even know what I'm going to call it yet, but I really love this, and I'm definitely going to check out The Night Circus by her as well, because I've heard some good things and some bad things about that, but since I really love this one, I'm really hoping that I love that one as well. But this is like a childhood dream for me, kind of just like this labyrinth library where just art and different literature, books and statues and cats, like, I mean, they're all just kind of like hanging out in this magical world. It's just something that I've always kind of like dreamed about, kind of like a place to escape and just get lost in books. So if you're looking for something like that, I would definitely recommend it. One thing that I would say though is it's very descriptive in its writing, and it really goes in depth with kind of like how it explains everything. So if you're not someone like that, then I definitely wouldn't recommend it. I mean, I would give it a try, but if you don't like it, then I would definitely just not pick it up, because it definitely continues on throughout the story. And the last one that I got to, I really picked up again like on a whim. It was randomly snowing, and since this one kind of like takes place in the snow, I was like, well, you know, let's give it a try. And that was One by One by Ruth Ware. Now, me and Ruth Ware have kind of had like a complicated relationship lately. I had really liked The Woman in Cabin 12 and The Turn of the Key. That's probably my favorite one of hers. But then I had read In a Dark Wood, and that was, like, to be honest, that was absolutely terrible. I hated that one so much. So I was hoping that this kind of would make up for that last one I read. I liked the setting, like the Alps, and kind of, I'm a skier, so that kind of like impacted my enjoyment a little bit. But the whole kind of getting trapped in by snow is like a trope that I always like to read about. and that kind of like excited me to kind of pick it up a little bit, because like everything I heard about it was that it was garbage. And so I was hoping that having like a background in those things and liking those would kind of like help. And it did to somewhat, but it's not one of her best works, I think. I still like The Turn of the Key, and I'm interested to see where I'll go from here. I think I've only got 2 more books that I haven't read from her, and it was like The Lying Game and The Death of Mrs. Westaway, which I've heard The Death of Miss Westaway is better. So if you know which one to go from here, just let me know. This is following like a tech group and how they all come together in the French Alps, and then eventually kind of like an avalanche happens and they're all trapped, and then someone dies, and it just goes on from there. Similar to those other booktubers, I really didn't like this one. I think I gave it 3 stars, and that was only because I like skiing and snow and being trapped in and all that. But if I didn't like that, like, I'd absolutely hate this book. Like, I hated all the characters except for like Erin and Danny, and I had knew who the killer was really early. It's like, there's a part in the book where something happens, and after that I was like, yeah, it's over. Like, I know what's going on, but I really kind of wanted just kept reading to figure out why they had done it. But I mean, it's just like, I hate talking crap about books, but this one really, I was hoping more from this one. I think I want to continue on with reading her 2 other books that I haven't read, The Lying Game and Death of Miss Westaway, which I've heard really good things about. I've heard that's one of her best ones. So if you know which one to go from here, let me know, because I don't, like, after reading this and In a Dark, Dark Wood, like, I don't know if I want to continue on with her, which is sad to say. I hate saying that about authors, and I hate talking crap about books, but it wasn't that for me. So that was a lot of books that I mentioned, and I'll make sure to leave everything that I talked about today in the comment or the description box below. But please let me know kind of like your thoughts on any of these books, like what you thought of them and what your plans are for the month of February, even though February, by the time you see this, February is probably orienting to be like a weekend, and I'm just way behind right now. School is just beating me up right now. But let me know what you think on any of them. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss out on another adventure. This is Mission Control. I hope you all have a nice day.